I've watched Money Heist. Watched Ozark, all of that.
Ozark, by the way. Ozark, by the way. Banging show. Banging show.
I was like,
What's that?
It's
a Ozark.
Pete, it's actually it's probably the best TV show I've seen on Netflix, in my opinion.
What is it about?
It's about
drugs and cleaning money.
Money laundering. But he's
money
a clean guy, but he's laundering money.
It's like an accountant that you'd see banging out an FRA job in a company.
Let me get that. Let me get that.
I'm going to tell my kids that Justin Timberlake played Ruth Langmore.
I saw that meme today.
Send me the link for that, please.
All right, cool. I'll show it to you.
Pete, I didn't know you're on Netflix like this, you know?
Huh?
Pete, I didn't know you. I didn't know you were on Netflix like this.
Hey, listen, on an empty stomach, with no energy and the productivity levels are low, it's all Netflix.
Oh, cool. I should tell you. Okay, cool.
When I say I'm talking from sunrise to sundawn, Netflix.
See, on that topic, in case anyone would like to know about Pabilo's television habits when he isn't fasting, episode 27, we talked about I got rid of my TV.
But I didn't get rid of my Netflix account.
I did get rid of my Netflix account. But actually, Pete, that gives us a perfect segue into today's episode, which is episode 52, I guess now, right?
Yeah.
Episode 52. So I know that we're still also in the Corona period, so I'll take the direction that Olu always gives us. So how is everyone doing in this lockdown coronavirus period before we go into the episode? Olu, how are you? Because you're the one normally asking this question.
I'm good. Cannot complain. I want clarity in regards to what the leaving the lockdown would look like, but maybe it's too early and no one really knows what it looks like. But I mean, that's the frustrating element, is it just keeps extending. It'll be okay if they say, okay, you know what, it's going to be a month, 2 months, but there's different stages. But apart from that, I'm good. Can't complain. Right, healthy, family's well. So
I was going to say, biceps look a bit pumped as well, so you're getting the home workout.
What can I say?
Small. DJ P, how you guys doing? All good?
Yeah, all well, managing, just taking it day by day.
And Daniel, how you doing? Daniel, there's no durag today, and you're muted.
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
But no durag. How come no durag?
But the thing is, you said
no. Last
it's all been packed in.
The last time.
Daniel, where's the comb?
The last time I was conditioning it. That's why I had the durag on.
Daniel, wait, come put your head closer. Put your head closer to the camera. When are you gonna comb it out?
Huh?
When are you gonna comb it out?
I combed it this morning.
No, but that's all been sort of packed down, though, right? Isn't it?
But too much.
All right. Sure,
the durag wasn't before. The durag wasn't.
And sure, how are you?
I'm good, man. Like, so obviously now at the moment, two of us, so Pabilo and I, we're just about a third away through the month of Ramadan. And actually, we wanted to use that as a topic of discussion today. So in today's episode, we're talking about Ramadan. So it's here, but what actually is it? Because there's been a few questions from some of my friends. I know we've received it as a group about what it actually is. So in today's episode, we'll explain a little bit about the month of Ramadan. We'll also explain what it actually means for us. What are we expected to do during this month? And then also what happens at the end. And I think what would be great is for us to reflect a bit about what are we learning about ourselves. And with Ramadan happening during the month of coronavirus and lockdown, etc., how is that impacting our fasting? And for all our loyal listeners that stay on until the end of the episode, we are bringing back a book review for this episode. It will be a 60-second book review where you hear about the book, the author, and a couple of the key takeaways. So other than that, I think thank you again for your continued support and listening. Please subscribe. Please give us a review. Please share it on your Instagram story whenever you're listening to this. I think with that, we'll set up for the episode to begin. So thank you for listening and see you all soon.
Take off, take flight with you. We never fly, but we're flying.
So what is Ramadan for you guys?
Well, first of all, pronounce it. He said Ramadan. It's Ramadan.
What's Ramadan? What's Ramadan for you guys? What does it mean?
It's Ramadan.
Ramadan for you guys.
Ramadan.
What's Ramadan for you guys, and what does it mean?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I mean,
P, you've got the beard, so you should go ahead.
No.
No.
So just my attempt at growing my beard for Sunnah, but it's
Alhamdulillah.
it's still very patchy. No, I think in short, many people would know that the month of Ramadan is basically the holy month of Islam. And from a historical standpoint, it was the month where our holy book, the Quran, was revealed to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so effectively Muslims, as one of the sort of requirements as a Muslim to sort of observe fasting for the 30 days of that Ramadan. So you got me saying now because Oli says Ramadan, I'm now saying it. He's got me saying it.
I just say just Ramadan.
But no, that's effectively what the month signals. But I think it'll be great for us to sort of go into the process and kind of what we focus on during that month. Sure. Anything you want to add in terms of, in short?
Yeah, I think just in terms of the actual day, as you were saying, so that's when the Quran was revealed. And then it's basically the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. Basically, within Islam, they follow the lunar calendar. So the calendar is based on the moon sighting and the cycles, which is actually why every year the month changes. Whereas in the Western world, they follow a solar calendar where the dates are fixed. So that's why Christmas is always the same day every year. Whereas this is why in the Islamic religion, why Ramadan actually changes every year. And it kind of goes up in a calendar. So last year, it would have been from May to June. And this year, it's April to May. And then the following year, it will be March to April, etc. So now I think, P, you teed it up perfectly for the next section about what it actually is. So I think most people would know Ramadan is about fasting. But I think the number one question that I get during this month is, so does that mean you're allowed to drink any water? Or does that mean you're allowed to eat anything? I don't know what questions you guys would have come up in your head if you hear the term around. Okay, well, that just come prep.
But it's true. That always seems to be the first question. So what? The people, I say, I'm fasting, and I've for the last sort of 15, 20 years, I've done that, and people have always said, "What? No water." So it's complete dry fasting from sun up to sundown, and the hours we're on UK time, so it's roughly around about 4 o'clock in the morning when you sort of open your fast, and today is probably going to be around 8:31 to close your fast. So it's about 15 hours dry fasting.
So actually here in Stockholm as well, it's from 3 a.m. until tonight. It will be 8:50. So obviously here there's a bit more daylight in the UK. So it's a bit.
Is there a website that you guys look to see the time, or is it just something that?
You have the mosques all around that will basically publish prayer times. So we sort of are going by your local mosque from that standpoint. But you can go online. But the thing for me, go on, Shua.
No, I was gonna plug. There's actually a really good app called Muslim Pro, in case there's any of our Muslim listeners that are listening, and it actually gives you the prayer times and also what time you should eat and break your fast, etc. And it's a very good app.
I have a question.
Go ahead, big man.
So you mentioned that the fasting, so you're abstaining from, it's a dry fast, as Pete said.
Yeah.
So no water or anything. So what else are you, in this 30-day period, what else are you supposed to do? Is it just that you're abstaining from food and liquid? Great question. In this particular 30 days, are you supposed to be doing something in particular in terms of your faith and, for example, prayer or almsgiving? What is it that you're meant to be focusing on?
Yeah, so that, I actually wanted to jump onto that because for me, actually, and I think for a lot of Muslims, it's the focus is actually not on. Many people would think the focus is on just the food and abstaining from eating, but actually, it's everything but that. So it's the 30 days is an opportunity to sort of reset and restart and reconnect from a spirituality standpoint. Go through, use the time to sort of reflect on a lot of your habits. Use the opportunity to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's an opportunity to give back and give to charity. So you're using the time to become a lot more empathetic for those that go without and have less. So that's really the sort of core and the spirit of the month. If in terms of, one should be trying to sort of where they have disagreements with people, sort of reconcile with people. And things of that nature.
Yeah, I think just to add, I think a couple of things probably is it's also a time to really spend with the family and friends. Obviously, at the moment in lockdown, it's pretty difficult. But the idea is every evening when you break your fast, you break it together as a family. I think especially nowadays, a lot of people, maybe when they're having dinner and stuff, it's in front of the TV, etc. That's typically what it would be like in the household with my parents, because everyone's eating at different times coming in and out of the house. But if I was at home with my parents and my brothers, it's actually the one specific time in the year where we all come together for dinner every evening when we're all home to eat and break fast together. I think just building on Daniel's question, so also there's an additional prayer that you're supposed to do after you break fast later in the night. Obviously, at the moment, most people can't go to the mosque because of the lockdown, etc., around the world. But that's another thing that they would do as well. And I think just to build on what P said, it's really a time to reflect and try and get closer to the religion for that 1 month. And just on a personal note, I think for me, I'm someone who isn't probably the most practicing Muslim. But I think for this particular month, it's nice for me to kind of reset and refocus on what is important, and it gives a way to reconnect with the faith, and also as Pete said, you get to appreciate all the things that you have, because you have this long daylight period without it, and you're supposed to give charity and all these other things as well.
So is that part of like the zakah? No, not zakah.
The zakah, yeah,
and the salat. So Shual, in addition to your prayers, you said there's an additional prayer. Is that addition into the salat?
Yeah. So basically, the salat is you have 5 prayers that you do a day, and then during the month of Ramadan, you have an extra prayer called Taraweeh, which you do basically. It's normally an hour or a couple of hours after you break your fast in the nighttime. And just to complement that question, Daniel, so there's 5 pillars of Islam. So Ramadan and fasting.
Shahada.
Go ahead.
I know them.
Run it.
Go ahead.
And Hajj.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Ramadan is one of the 5, and then the other 4 that you mentioned, obviously. Hajj is a bit difficult at the moment with the travel lockdown, but the other 4 are elements which you can do even more during the month of Ramadan.
Whilst you mentioned, I know I don't want to digress and take away, but I have many questions. So with the Hajj, which is obviously encouraged that every Muslim do at least once in their lifetime. Yeah. How do you think that? What's the effect of COVID-19 on, for example, the pilgrimage in Mecca, and also how the Muslims would usually congregate at the end of Ramadan? How do you think that's going to impact? Because this is probably the first time it's ever happened, I imagine.
Yeah, I think at least I can give a quick comment before maybe passing it over to Pete. I think they've cancelled all travel plans. So normally with Hajj and with the pilgrimage, you've probably seen images of it. There's millions of people that flock to Mecca and Saudi Arabia to perform the pilgrimage. And I could be wrong, but this is the first time that they've had to stop it to this level, where you see overhead images of the Kaaba, which is where the main praying area for Muslims are. And then that whole area is empty. And actually, it's amazing, because now the only people that get to pray in this holy site for Muslims are actually cleaners. And I think that emphasizes also that during this month, it doesn't matter what your wealth is, what you're earning, what status, whatever you are, during this month, everyone is the same, as they should be the whole year. And everyone's going through the same process together. But Pete, do you want to add anything to that?
I think to Daniel's point, how is it? I think once then Muslims are given the green light to sort of travel, I think it's going to sort of perhaps go back to a similar level it was before, purely based on the fact that people that I think once they've committed spiritually, they're going to attend, and they're going to still take part in Hajj. Some people would even say if it's the last thing that I do, then so be it. So it'll be interesting to see the numbers, but I can imagine it being around the same level as it was before COVID-19. But that just depends as to when they open up.
So have either of you been to? So I was going to just quickly say, have either of you been to Kaaba or gone on a Hajj to see what is to believe to be built by Ibrahim?
Yeah, I haven't been on Hajj, neither than any of my immediate family. But we've done Umrah several times. So it's basically like a smaller miniature version of Hajj, if you like. Done it about 3-4 times.
Yeah, I think I'm similar to P in the sense that Hajj, and also it's a requirement for all Muslims to do this at least once in their lifetime. So I haven't done that because there's multiple steps and it's quite a longer period. But I've also done, as P said, the smaller version, which is called Umrah, which is basically you do parts of what you would do during a pilgrimage, but it's a scaled back version. And it's not mandatory for Muslims to do. It's just it's an additional bonus. Whereas Hajj is something that everyone should do at least once in their lifetime.
Olu.
So yeah, go ahead. So Shua, like you mentioned, mandatory. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to Ramadan, is it something that you feel is mandatory? How do you know when to even start it? Because I think a lot of people might see certain people that are not in the way they want to be in their faith, but then during Ramadan, all of a sudden it's okay, let me completely change and do it, right?
Yeah.
Is there like a criteria? Is there a place you want to be, or is it just more of a tick
An act
box
of
exercise?
religiosity.
Yeah.
No,
And then
so I
also, how do people look at it for when people say, you know what, I'm not at the right stage, so I'm not going to do it? It's like when I think about Christianity, right? We have communion.
Yeah.
And it's a situation where I know growing up in school, some people would just take communion for the sake of just taking it, right? But not truly know the implications and how serious it is, right? So I'm just wondering if you find it's similar with Ramadan, or is it something that you need to be somewhere, you need to be completely focused before doing it?
So no, so I think first,
before you respond, and just to add to Olu's question, I think it would be appropriate to insert here: at what age do you have to start, or is there a particular age?
Yeah, so the general guidance, I think, from what I understand, is I think once you hit puberty, then you are expected to sort of take part in Ramadan if you can. So when I say if you can, it means providing that you have good health. So those that are expected to that are basically given an exception or asked not to are those who are pregnant, those who are sort of on their monthly cycle. If you're obviously you haven't got the right health, then you shouldn't basically partake in fasting or Ramadan. So that's sort of general guidance. Go ahead, Dan.
Then how about what's the case of athletes? What would be the case of athletes?
Yeah, so that's also an interesting topic, because what I think I believe what was it? What was the sort of guidance? Because you have athletes that actually still go through and fast, like I know Mohamed Salah or even I think Mo Farah, even when they're actually competing. So I believe now they do it because they're committed, and they do it because they still want to make sure that they are reaping the benefits and the blessings during the month. But I believe if your work and the type of work that you carry out deems that it doesn't necessarily put you in a good position to fast, I think that can, in some regards, give you some sort of an exception. So, but ultimately, what it comes down to Olu's question, your question, it really comes down to your connection with Allah, your connection with God. How close do you feel to God for you to be able to feel like I have to fast? That's my expectation upon myself, or actually I'll perhaps not and do it next year. So I think it comes down to the individual relationship you have.
Yeah,
but how is it perceived in the community? And she will answer it, but I want to understand, like, how is it perceived in the community where someone might choose not to fast? Will their perception be like, oh, they're not a real Muslim, or they're not taking it seriously?
No, but I think
but then it
go ahead, Pete.
So in an ideal setting, then there should be no one judging, right? So ultimately, it's difficult to answer your question because I've never heard an imam say, "Well, that young boy is not fasting, and it's not good, it's bad." I think they just recommend you and they just encourage you that if you can, you should. But ultimately, if you feel like you're not in a place where you actually are mentally there or spiritually there, then look, you could do it next year, right? So I think it comes down to you have to feel ready as a person. Otherwise, then it's forced, and then perhaps then you're not necessarily going to get the benefits out of it as how you'd like. But no one should be judging. So that's ultimately what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, it just really does come down to the individual and how you want to do it. So if I reflect on my own kind of journey during the month of Ramadan since I've been growing up. So when I was growing up, to be very transparent, to not fast wasn't a question in my head because my parents were doing it, in my household we were doing it. Then basically when I went to university and stuff, then I started to give some excuses. I was like, oh, well, I've got exams, or I've got studying, or I've got this, or I've got that. So then naturally, with the older I got, I kind of moved away from it. And during the month of Ramadan, maybe I'd just do it on the weekends. But it wasn't as strict to doing the full 30 days. And even once I started working, I even used to use the excuse as well, like I'm working now, I need to be focused, etc. But maybe this echoes to what Daniel was asking about the athletes. It really comes down to the individual and how they feel and what they want to do. Now the older I've got, the more I've leaned back into it. I think especially with my dad after he went to hospital for a couple of months, and it was really touch and go whether he would make through it. I think that was a triggering moment for me where I leaned more into my faith, and that's why since then, the last 2-3 years, I've tried to do the fast every day during that month. And to your question, Olio, about whether the community judges or not, I think naturally there's going to be people, and I'm one of them, that I know during this month I practice more than I will the rest of the year. But I think something is better than nothing. And the idea is that during this month, every year, if someone has that time and effort to reconnect with their faith, then it will have even if it makes them practice a little bit more between that month to the following year, even that is still an advantage to the individual. And as P said, the community as itself, they shouldn't be judging, because that in itself is something that no one should be doing in probably all religions. But just to close that, basically the people who shouldn't fast, so children is actually, if they want to do it, it's a bonus, but they don't have to. Pregnant women, of course, because of the health implications, they shouldn't. Also, the elderly and those who are ill. So if you're elderly and you have to take medication, then you're not expected to fast as well. And also for people who are traveling extensively during this period, they also don't need to fast. So that's normally
it's interesting about the traveling one, because it really came to the point where Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would travel miles and miles in the desert, right? And so when I was growing up, when I heard that, I thought, oh, if you travel, you shouldn't have to fast. So here's me now taking a short flight,
booking flights
from Basel to London, and in my mind I was like,
food.
when I found
on a plane, can I order?
So I was like, no. So I had this kind of conversation with myself, and I was like, P, you're not traveling desert to desert, bro. So you need to still fast. So I was still fasting when traveling. But just to go back on. So just to go back a little bit on some of the points, so it's about self-control, it's about discipline, give yourself a chance to refresh and restart in certain number of habits. But maybe to touch on, Shuel, some of the things that you're expected to sort of abide by whilst you're fasting. Because I think this is obviously, like somebody listening to this will think, why on earth would you go 15 hours a day dry fasting? And I think within those 15 hours, the idea is it's a change behavior, right? So you should almost refrain from bad habits, refrain from swearing, sort of being a loudmouth, from sexual activities. So again, listening to the sort of music that has the wrong influence. So it's really trying to sort of.
So none of you have listened to Drake's new album,
mate. Can I just say I have not listened to the album yet, and I'm Drake's #1 fan.
But I think this part is important, because I think during these hours. So let's say you shouldn't be smoking or things of that nature, and I think that is where you really start to sort of see the benefit and feel it, because on an empty stomach, and if you're sort of thinking about others and having that gratitude, it's a really powerful set of hours.
But then, Pete, to that point, why don't people continue that throughout the year? So not necessarily. Wait.
It's a big boy question. Go on.
Not necessarily from abstaining from food and liquid for 15 hours, but you mentioned about the refrain from. Wait, let me land. For those who are listening, Pete's taking off his headphones.
Go on. I tell you what.
For example, refrain from smoking or refrain from consumption of alcohol. Refrain from, say, fornication outside of marriage, abstain from listening to music that of a bad influence. Okay, the food and liquid you need to sustain you. It goes without saying that we need food and liquid to survive. So outside of those 30 days, why don't people continue to do it if they feel that within those 30 days there's a great benefit for themselves? They grow and get closer to God. So why don't they do outside of those 30 days? Why do they go back to that old lifestyle?
It's $1 million question.
So this is like This is basically the question that every Muslim will have to ask themselves as they close the Ramadan and come towards the end of it, because it's actually, I think, the most important and significant question. Just to your point, Dan, most of us have dug deep, and we've spent the 30 days really working on our habits, changing, improving, thinking about others, giving to charity. And what effectively is happening over a course of a year, we have 11 months of a lifestyle A, and then those 30 days of a lifestyle B. And the whole idea is to use the month to sort of come out of it better and continue those habits.
Yeah.
And that is the hardest thing to do. And we all struggle with it. I struggle tremendously with it because you know that a lot of the habits you're developing, you should carry on. And you say, okay, you've a lot to do with the environment that you're in, the influences, but that's probably the thing that we all should focus on and do. And ultimately, to answer your question, Daniel, that should actually be the thing. That's the whole point of actually using this month to get better and to sustain those habits.
And I think it's actually the fact that it's something that all Muslims need to do every year. I think no matter what level of faith you have, is actually a genius way to make people reconnect and realize all the stuff and all the noise that they have within their lives. Because every year, if you know that this period is coming and it forces you to refocus and rebalance everything, then it never gets easier per se after the month to get back to being like a full-blown practicing Muslim the whole time. But I think every year you get that reminder and it forces you to try and carry on most of the things that you mentioned, Daniel.
So for example, Daniel, I'll give you a personal example that's happening now. What's interesting? With COVID, with the lockdown, actually it's a blessing and it's a gift and a curse for Ramadan, because on one hand, I can't remember the last time where I was in a situation where I was able to pray 5 times a day on time. Right, it's always usually you can pray a couple prayers on time, and then the rest you've got to make up on the next prayer. And so that's an amazing position to be in, because every single on time, there's no excuse anymore. You can pray on time. And so what that starts to do is it makes me ask the question, okay, why am I not prioritizing my calendar and my time outside of Ramadan to make sure I can still pray on time? Right, and so that speaks to the point of developing going back to the core and developing such a good habit and continuing that moving forward. So there's a lot of questions that I'm asking myself. There's a lot of reflection points that I'm having, because I think, to Daniel's question, if you look into it deeply, there are actually no excuses as to why you can't continue certain habits. We just choose perhaps to ignore. We just choose to perhaps live a bit lax, to be honest, and say, well, this is what I'm used to doing.
Do you discover something new about yourself each time? Because this is not the first time you both fasted and gone through Ramadan. So do you find that you're discovering something new about yourself, about your faith every single time? Or does it feel similar each time that you do it and it feels more like, okay, I know this month is more like a routine? Or does it,
I think
you discover something new?
Sure.
And what do you discover? And what do you discover about yourself during this period?
I can go, sure.
Go ahead, Pierre. No, thank you.
What I learn every year is it gets harder. Not the fasting per se, but I would say, from a real personal, keeping it very transparent, I think when I look back when I was much younger, I just found it was perhaps easier to practice. It's easier to sort of build a closer connection. And as you get older, you start taking on more responsibilities. You start building your businesses. You have the family, and it can be. And I think one has to work extremely harder to sort of keep close and stay as close as I was perhaps when I was younger. So I think every year I'm finding that I'm having to dig deeper to be as close to the faith as I always like to be, based on my expectations.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, sorry.
I think for it'll just be a quick one. I think the first realization is how much my day and time and life centers around food and water. Like it's just to keep it very, very real. Like, you realize, in terms of preparing food, eating food, cooking, all of this time is now taken out. And then, of course, I'm praying more than I would usually do. But you realize how much time is kind of centered around that. That's one thing. And two, I think, just similar to P's point, the fact that it seems to be getting difficult the older. I think in my case, as I said, I had that period probably in my early 20s where I wasn't doing it that much at all, and now I've the last couple of years been leaning back into it. I think the biggest realization for me is how much of my normal life is quite far away from a life which would be in line with practicing Islam like full-time properly. So I think the older I get, the more I realize that, and I think there's certain habits I've been able to drop off every year, habits which aren't in line with necessarily practicing Islam all the time. So I think that's one benefit, but that's a kind of a reminder that I get every year, which certain aspects of my life and routine that I've got used to that aren't necessarily in line with being a better Muslim.
But sure, you mentioned about being a practicing Muslim, but if Islam is a faith about, a monotheistic religion, as in believing in one, devoting yourself to one God.
Yeah.
If it's a faith and it's a daily practice, how do you stop that daily practice?
I think probably on that, I think during the years, that faith and that belief has never changed, but just the way of practicing it has. And that way of practicing has gone up and down. So I think to your question, I don't think that faith actually goes. At least this is just for me personally. It's never gone. I've always had that belief. It's just the ways that I can practice it in terms of praying more, like keeping all my fast for the whole month, giving more to charity, all of these things. Maybe in some years it was less than others.
I think exactly to your point. I think it speaks to the quality of your deen, right? So to Shaw's point, the faith has never changed; it never will change. You know, you're firm on what you believe, but you can improve the quality of your prayers. You can improve the quality of certain sunnahs that you do within the deen, certain small things that you actually do. Sometimes
what does deen mean for people who don't know, and sunnah? Deen basically means belief.
No. So deen.
Just in case for the listeners who may not know what that means.
Sorry. So sunnah is like your acts, the acts in which you sort of perform on a daily basis. So there's hadiths which is like guidance on acts that you can do. So I can call it sunnah. And then Shua's point, deen is like your strength as a Muslim, your belief. So when someone says I'm on my deen, and I think you might have heard that before, it's like I'm on my. Go on.
I think Skepta had that as a lyric, right, in one of his songs.
Yeah, you're not on your deen. So is this your ability to strengthen and believe in practice?
I thought the sunnah was a record of Muhammad's deeds and words.
Yeah, sunnah is actually so
acts, and that translates.
It's a record of Muhammad's deeds. And okay.
So sunnah is basically all the acts that Prophet Muhammad did. So there's like mandatory things that you need to do in the Islamic religion, which are the 5 pillars that we discussed earlier in the episode. And the sunnah are basically things that the way of life and the things that Prophet Muhammad did that aren't mandatory, but these are recommended for all Muslims to do.
And does that help you also? Is that also used to help you interpret the Quran?
Yes, big man. Mate, we might need to take you down to the mosque, DJ.
I've studied.
Daniel's well versed.
I've studied Islam, Judaism, and other religions as well, like Hinduism and Buddhism. Okay, no. My other question was going to be, Pete, you mentioned about the month you believe that receiving blessings. So what are these blessings you believe you'll receive, and are these mentioned in the Quran or are these part of the Sunnah?
Yeah, it's ultimately in summary, it's like everything is basically times 100, times 1,000. So each prayer counts for a lot more than it would outside of the month of Ramadan.
But right? How do you know that?
It's not how do I know it?
Sorry. When I say how do you know that, is it recorded in the Quran or is it recorded anywhere to say that your prayers in this particular month will be magnified?
Yeah, no, there is. That's the guidance from imams, and that's kind of what we understand and what we believe. We know if we can double down on all our good habits and good deeds during this month, we believe we come out of it having multiplied those benefits and those blessings. So it's almost to say, don't waste the opportunity to gain the blessings during this month.
Okay, that's interesting.
No,
Oli, you got any more questions? I got plenty.
No,
I'm fascinated. I'm interested.
So I remember living in Dubai.
Yeah.
When I was there during the Ramadan period and being invited to breaking the fast and going out and celebrating is a very community driven. Like, it's not even, people would not just stay in their families, they'll meet up with other families and celebrate together. Can you just share that experience and how tough it must be during obviously quarantine period to actually do that because you're isolated?
Yeah, no, it is challenging because the a key part of the month of Ramadan is something called, when you break your fast, you then go into something called iftar, and iftar is effectively a gathering of family and friends where you're basically feasting, right? So it's great conversation. It's you open up with water, sweets, dates, and then there's meals that you can just sort of enjoy until whenever. And there's an unlimited supply of food, and so that's one of the things that people are daily going to miss. It's what makes Ramadan, coming together as a family. And I can go back when I was living in Saudi Arabia. It was just to give you a sense of what it's like. We actually every night the iftar would be given to say for example, you put together 30 families, and each night the iftars happen at the different family's house. But some people would even go as far as hiring an entire hall, right? Huge place where you can, after eating, you can then play sports after. So it's like every night for 30 nights in the evening, every night.
No. But what time are you playing sport? Like AM?
No. Like, for example, if you break your fast around, say, 6, 7, people are then playing football at, say, 8, 9.
Okay.
So you can imagine, it's like, imagine every single night for 30 nights, well most nights, you're having a full-blown event, right? And so you can imagine...
And imagine being in Dubai during that time as well.
It's amazing. So
yeah.
So to not have the opportunity to spend iftar with family and friends is certainly going to be disappointing for many of us. Because it's also an opportunity to also invite non-Muslims and other people that also want to join and eat. So it's not just, closing the door. It's saying, look, we're creating this big feast. Come and join, enjoy, and sort of eat with us. But I can tell you guys, just from in case anyone's wondering, listening, what is it like after 15 hours? And this is what I think makes it quite amazing, and the sort of the joy and the blessing behind it. After 15 hours of dry fast, the appreciation you have for a glass of water, or a sip of water, or a Jaffa cake, or a biscuit, or a date.
We know you got plenty of Jaffa cakes.
Oh, I'm telling you, you start
Jaffa cake king.
And so I think I think it speaks. I mentioned earlier. I think it speaks to gratitude is best felt on an empty stomach. You really empathize with those who go without, and you really start to highly appreciate things as small as biscuits when it comes to breaking your fast.
I've got 2 more questions. I'll direct the first one at Shawal and then the last one at P, because the last one relates to P. So Shawal, do you find, and obviously P can answer afterwards as well, do you find that during the month of fasting you put on weight because you've gone 15 hours without food and water, and it's very easy once you've had a fast to kind of eat so much? But I know when you break a fast after that long, you do kind of feel sick if you eat a heavy meal straight away. So do you find that typically you put on weight, lose weight, or you just stay the same?
So typically, my whole body composition gets completely messed up. So you would think that you'd be losing weight, but exactly as you said, Daniel, by the time I break my fast, once I've broken it with hopefully some fruit, some water, etc., and some healthy-ish meal, between that time and before sunrise again, so during that period when it's dark, when you can eat, I want to eat everything. Like I want like fried foods, I want crisps, I want this, I want that. I've stopped myself where I'm trying to not buy as many of those things, but it's difficult. And then I think in previous years I haven't done as much exercise during the month. This year so far, I think it's only been 10 days at the period of when we're recording this, and I've still been able to maintain a gym routine in the mornings, which I think is helping a little bit. But I have already gained weight. I weighed myself at the weekend and I've gained a kilo. So I leave that's from my perspective. It's difficult to not gain weight, but it depends on the food you eat. And typically, if you're not doing as much activity, then you'll end up putting on a bit of timber. But P, what's it for you?
What about you, big belly rude boy?
In actual fact,
It's just sound better. The funniest thing is Daniel has been waiting 40 minutes to say that one line.
The thing is, in actual fact, you're actually going back to the guidance and Sunnah. You're actually not supposed to overeat. You should actually use the month to eat less. And actually, we all know from sort of intermittent fasting is that fasting actually is healthy for you. But no, I'm not working out. So she was doing well in that area. I think I'm actually Lauren said I'm losing weight. So
what's
I don't
that
really
stomach
have.
thing? What's that stomach?
Stomach's alright, man. Stomach's alright. You know, if I'm telling you, if I was gaining weight, you'd probably be able to see it on my cheeks and everything like that. I was gonna mention a point now. Anyways.
So Daniel, you said you had 2 questions. What was the other question?
And then the second question was for those who might see P's Instagram stories and stuff. You show your kind of daily routine in terms of your prayer, and you have different names for the different prayers. So do you want to just quickly explain for the likes of me who may not understand what those different prayers are. I know, of course, they're the 5 different times during the day, but why is there a different name, or what do they mean?
Yeah, so I can see Shua laughing.
It's a great question.
It's a great question. I've just never had to answer that question. No, so there's five prayers in the day which are compulsory, which is part of the 5 pillars of Islam. The first prayer is your morning prayer, which is Fajr prayer. I'm just thinking of how much detail to go into it in terms of rakahs and everything. But that's so we pray that around just before sunrise.
Dawn. Yeah, so you got
exactly, and then you've got.
So I was going to say, dawn,
and then
noon,
go ahead.
Mid-afternoon, sunset, and night.
Exactly. So it's really
from observations of your Instagram posts.
Correct. Yeah. No. So if you take away the times, no, that's absolutely correct, because ultimately these are prayers that were prayed at a time where there were no clocks. You was effectively going by the sun. So the next prayer is then Zuhr prayer, which is at, I think, the highest point that the sun is at, and then you have your afternoon prayer, which is Salat al-Asr, and then Salat al-Maghrib is just as sun sets, and then you have your last prayer, which is Salat al-Isha. And then each prayer has a different number of sort of rakats, which is, when you're you see Muslims stand in a certain position, how many times they go down and up. But that's ultimately, I think, Dan, you're frozen. That's ultimately, in summary, the 5 prayers.
Okay. No, thank you. That's helpful. And just actually, whilst on that, it's are any of those poses, for example, when Mo Salah scores a goal, or someone of the Islamic faith, they go down to their knees, put their hands by the side, and they kiss the ground and they look up. Yeah. What's the meaning of that? If you
sure.
Okay. Dan, these are great questions, big man. So basically, what Mohamed Salah, as an example, what he's doing that action that we basically do when we're praying, right? Where you're bringing your head down and praying before God. And I think what's great about him is when he's celebrating a goal, it actually shows you that during this period where you scored a goal, you have a moment of elation, you have this moment of celebration where Alan Shearer used to walk around the pitch doing this. People used to do, Robbie Keane used to do like a flip. Drogba had his celebration, right? But it's actually very powerful where someone like Mohamed Salah, who obviously plays for one of the top football teams, not only in Europe but the world, the first thought that comes to his mind is to give thanks to God. And I think for him, it's actually it's an indication of his faith. I think Pabila mentioned as well earlier in the episode that he's someone who observes the full month of Ramadan when it's ongoing, even during a football game. And you've seen him on the football pitch actually break his fast with water. So I think for him, it just shows, and at least my take on it, is that he has faith at the forefront of his mind during the good times and also during the bad. But the action that he's doing himself, that's an action that all Muslims do when they're praying, as Pabila said, during the 5 prayers of the day. I mean, every time they go down, it's called ruku. So that's what he's doing.
Thank you.
Cool. So I think we're close to the end of the episode. Oli, I don't know if you have any other.
I've got many more questions, but I think I've exhausted. I've exhausted this episode.
No, that's fine. But I think it's great because it provides more context for the listeners. I was going to say any questions more geared towards the actual fast itself, because Daniel's going deep into the faith.
No,
Daniel's going deep into Islam.
I think we from the fast, because I fast, so I do understand the principle. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have any question from that per se, but I did ask, is it just water and liquid you abstain from? Are you supposed to abstain from anything else? And you mentioned about, smoking, influence of music, etc. So we kind of covered that. So I don't have anything more to say from the fast. I think you both explained it quite in detail, and I've left having a better understanding of the month of Ramadan.
Oli, do you have any other questions or?
No, I'm good.
Perfect. So I think Daniel, you actually offered up lots of good questions more around the faith, and maybe we can do a follow-up episode where I don't know if you've mentioned it already in this episode, but basically at the end of the month of fasting, we come together and we celebrate. And that celebration is called Eid, and the one at the end of the month of fasting is called Eid al-Fitr. Did you guys already talk about it?
No.
Oh, okay. So that basically
mentioned about not the Eid one, but you mentioned about
So that's I was talking about every night when we spend like in Saudi, you do iftars with big families. But this is effectively like a huge celebration. Huge.
Yes. So it's like from a celebration standpoint, it's the equivalent of is kind of a Muslim equivalent of Christmas, for example, where you come together as family. You're allowed to eat during the day. That morning when you come downstairs and you have breakfast for the first time.
Oh my god!
Oh my god! What a blessing!
Oh.
Oh, and I think. Go ahead. No, I think because the other thing I wanted to mention, which I think is also important, is that one of the things that people shouldn't do during their fast, and I'll come on to that point, is you shouldn't think about breaking your fast. You shouldn't think about food. You shouldn't think about, oh, why am I fasting? It's really to sort of control your thoughts and just to sort of use that time to reflect and get better. And the reason why I say that is because as we just started to get excited about having breakfast on Eid day, these are kind of the sort of thoughts that you're supposed to control, right? Not getting too excited about, like, we shouldn't get too excited now about Eid. We should be focusing about maximizing today, maximizing tomorrow. But there are times where you're just thinking, I've got 3 weeks left. I'm counting down the days, and we shouldn't do that, right? So it's just the reality of what happens in our minds throughout the fast. But yeah, Eid is a blessed day, man.
That breakfast is a good one because basically, you eat together as a family. You're supposed to go to the mosque and pray. There's a special prayer on that day, and then for the rest of that day, you go see friends and family who typically you may not have been able to see as much during the month. And also, you give. You're supposed to wear brand new clothes to feel fresh, to symbolize the beginning of a new month, and then you give gifts as well, typically to kids as well. So all right. So for any of our loyal listeners that have made it to this far of the episode, I'm trying to bring back a book review. I'm going to do this within 60 seconds because we've had some episodes early on in the Take Flight podcast era where we had a very, very long reviews and debates. So I'm going to try and do this in 60 seconds. Right. So the book that I'm going to be talking about, okay, you can start the timer from now, 48:43. So the book that I'm talking about is by Stephen A. Schwarzman. It's called What It Takes. So Stephen A. Schwarzman is basically the chairman, CEO, and co-founder of Blackstone, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the world, and it's got billions of dollars worth of assets under management.
538.
538 billion. There you go. Thanks for the alley-oop. So this book is called Lessons in the Pursuit of Excellence, and basically Stephen Schwarzman is a guy who grew up in pretty humble beginnings, and he went to good university, went to Yale, then went to Harvard and did his MBA. And then he had a job at an investment bank, and he was in his kind of early 30s, had a job which was paying him very, very well. But he just had this feeling that he wasn't fulfilling his potential. And he's someone that probably people would have looked at and would have thought, wow, this guy's got it all, but he still didn't think that was enough. He thought he had more in the bank. And basically, he created this firm called Blackstone, which only started with him and another partner in the office. It was just the two of them. They had this big office space and no desks or anything. And in the book, he basically explains the journey of how he created Blackstone from a small startup to a $500 billion plus asset management firm, investing in real estate and many other spaces. So, Olu, thanks for reminding me that I've taken up the 60 seconds. I've realized now during this review that 60 seconds is a lot shorter than than I thought at the beginning. So
the 60 seconds told us who the book was about. Thanks. Yeah. So on next week's
that's good. I think
no. I think continue. It's definitely I'm interested. No, let me continue.
No, there's nothing. I think that's actually the perfect. I don't want to go into the details, but I'm just saying if the book is recommended by this podcast, just take it as a fact that it's a great book. If you want to know about how to start up a company, how to set things up at all levels, and how to basically have these fundamental principles of excellence that you have from day one, and how this has carried through into him building out the organization that he's done today.
Sure. I was going to just say I thank you for bringing thank you for bringing this topic and making an episode. I really enjoy sharing more about what the month is about, and happy to sort of touch on this towards the end as we get closer towards Eid.
Perfect. So who wants the closing honors?
So thank you all for listening to episode 52 of Take Flight Podcast. We hope you've left a bit more educated around we're in the month of Ramadan and what it means for those who are practicing the faith. Please give us any feedback that you may have to takeflightpodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram @takeflightpodcast. We hope you stay well in this season, you and your families and your loved ones. See you next week. Take care. God bless.
Peace.
Take off, take flight with you. For we never fly, but we're